I'm Sarah, a 28-year-old tourist from Tehran. I never thought my trip to Istanbul would turn into such a horrifying nightmare. That night, I decided to go to one of the famous bars in the Taksim area to have some fun. The bar was crowded with foreign travelers. I sat in a corner and started sipping my cocktail. It was around midnight when I noticed a man who kept staring at me. I had a bad feeling and decided to return to my hotel earlier. When I left the bar, I realized that the man had followed me. I quickened my pace, but he sped up too. Suddenly, I felt a strong hand grab my arm. Before I could scream, a cloth was pressed against my mouth, and everything went black. When I regained consciousness, I found myself in a dark, damp room. My hands and feet were tied, and I could hear heavy breathing. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I was horrified to realize that I wasn't alone. Several other people were in the same condition as me, scattered around the room. I heard footsteps from behind the door, and the man I had seen in the bar entered. He had a devilish smile on his face and a knife in his hand. With a thick accent, he said, "Welcome to our little party. We're going to have a lot of fun tonight." My heart was pounding out of my chest. I realized we had fallen into the hands of a human trafficking ring. The man started examining each of us. When he got to me, he ran his hand across my face and said, "You're very pretty. We have special customers for you." Hours passed in terror and anxiety. I could hear the screams and pleas of other victims as they were taken from the room one by one. I didn't know what was happening to them, but their screams continued for a long time. When it was my turn, I had lost all hope. They took me to another room filled with torture devices. There were several other men there who grinned ominously when they saw me. One of them said, "Prepare this one well. We need to send her to Dubai tomorrow." Terrified, I started screaming and struggling. Suddenly, the sound of police sirens came from outside. Everything became chaotic. The men frantically tried to escape, and in the confusion, I managed to free myself. With trembling legs, I ran out of the building and threw myself into the arms of the police. Later, I learned that the Turkish police had been after this gang for a long time and had managed to track them down that night. Even now, when I think about that night, my whole body shakes. I can never forget the screams of the other victims. That experience changed my life forever. And now every time I want to travel, the horror of that night in Istanbul comes back to haunt me. My name is Jack, a 35-year-old bartender in one of the oldest pubs in London. There had always been rumors about wandering spirits in this old pub, but I never believed them. Until one night, everything changed. That night, the pub was quieter than usual. We only had a few customers sitting here and there. It was close to 11 p.m. when a man in old-fashioned clothes entered. At first, I thought he might have come from a costume party, but when he got closer, I had a strange feeling. The man sat at the bar and said in a voice that seemed to come from the bottom of a well, "I want a drink, the same one I used to have 200 years ago." My heart sank. My hands started shaking. I wanted to answer him, but suddenly he vanished. Terrified, I looked around. The other customers seemed to have seen nothing. I thought maybe I was hallucinating. But a few minutes later, a scream came from upstairs. I rushed up and encountered a scene I'll never forget. One of the customers, a young girl, had fallen to the floor and was staring at a spot. When I looked in that direction, my heart stopped. A woman in Victorian dress, with a bloody face and eyes bulging out of their sockets, was staring at us. Her lips were moving as if she wanted to say something, but no sound came out. I tried to compose myself. I picked up the girl and tried to take her out of the room, but suddenly the door slammed shut. Demonic laughter echoed from every corner of the room. The walls started shaking and objects in the room began to fly. In panic, I tried to open the door, but it seemed locked from the outside. I could hear moans and screams coming from behind the walls. I felt like thousands of invisible hands were touching my body. The girl had fainted, and I was going crazy. Suddenly, a deep, scary voice whispered in my ear, "This pub belongs to us. You living ones have no right to be here." Then I felt a strong force pulling me toward the window. I was about to be thrown out when suddenly everything stopped. The door opened, and some of the customers from downstairs came up. They looked at me and the girl huddled in the corner, shaking with surprise. No one could believe what had happened. After that night, I could never work in that pub like before. I had nightmares every night and heard the voices of those spirits. Some nights, even when I was awake, I saw shadows moving around the corners of the pub. A few months later, while I was cleaning the pub's basement, I found some bones and skulls. After police investigations, it was revealed that this place used to be a torture and murder site for political opponents. It seemed the spirits of those victims were still wandering there. Now years have passed since that incident, but I still hear the demonic laughter and painful moans when I pass by that pub. That experience changed my life forever and made me believe in a world we can't see. I'm Marcus, a 25-year-old dancer from São Paulo. I always dreamed of participating in the Rio Carnival. Finally, this year I got the chance and excitedly headed to Rio de Janeiro. But I didn't know that this trip would be the last journey of my life. The night before the carnival started, a few other dancers and I decided to go to one of Rio's famous bars to have a small celebration. The bar was crowded and the music was loud. Everyone was dancing and drinking. It was around midnight when a beautiful woman approached me. She had long black hair and large dark eyes. She asked me to dance with her. I couldn't say no. When we started dancing, I had a strange feeling. It was as if time had stopped, and only she and I existed. I don't know how much time passed, but when I came to my senses, I found myself in a dark, empty alley. I was confused and dazed. The woman was still beside me, smiling. She said, "Come, I want to show you a special place." I don't know why, but I followed her. She took me to an old abandoned building. When we entered, I heard strange music. It sounded like hundreds of people were singing, but in a language I couldn't understand. We entered a large hall. My jaw dropped in amazement. Hundreds of people were there, all dressed in strange, old-fashioned clothes. It was as if they had come from centuries ago. They were all dancing, but their dance was weird and scary. The woman took my hand and led me into the crowd. She said, "Now it's your turn to dance." I started dancing, but no matter how much I danced, I didn't get tired. It was as if a strange force was giving me energy. Gradually, I realized that something wasn't right. My feet were getting numb, and I felt like I was burning from the inside. I wanted to stop, but I couldn't. It was as if my body was out of my control. I looked around in horror. I finally realized that those people weren't people at all. Their faces were melting, revealing bare skulls underneath. Their laughter had turned into screams and moans. The woman, who had now turned into a skeleton with fiery eyes, came close to me and said, "Welcome to the dance of death. You're one of us now." I looked at my hands in horror. They were turning into bone. I screamed and tried to escape, but my feet wouldn't move. The crowd surrounded me and started chanting strange incantations. I don't know how much time passed, maybe hours, maybe days. I just danced and danced. I didn't feel pain anymore. I didn't feel fear. There was only dance and music. Until one day, some construction workers found me, my dried up body still in a dancing position. The police couldn't find the cause of my death. No one believed that I come out of my grave at night and return to that hall to continue my eternal dance. Now every year during Carnival, I and the other wandering spirits wait for new victims. So if one night in Rio, a beautiful woman asks you to dance with her, think twice. That dance might be the last dance of your life.